no game, but it's a busy week on the beat with injury news, the latest on the transfer portal, and the college football playoff looming. We've got it all tonight, live.
Giving you the insider takes and the big picture view on the Dawgs. This is On the Beat, presented by Ingles with DawgNation insider Mike Griffith and Cody Chaffins.
Happy Monday night to you. Thank you all for joining us here on the beat. We are live tonight. Don't get to do that a ton anymore, but happy to have Mike Griffith. I'm Cody Chaffins with you, and got to be live, Mike, because we thought it'd be a slow week. We were looking at things finally slow down. They hadn't slowed down one bit.
No, you never know what's going to happen now, Cody, with the transfer portal open. And of course, we got some injury updates tonight on Carson, Beck, and Brett Thorson. And of course, the Dawgs looking forward to the next game. The matchups are set. We finally know how this bracket is shaking out. And I got to tell you, Christmas came early for the Dawgs.
Yeah, we'll talk about Georgia's draw in the college football playoff coming up on the show. I've also got my boots on the ground video. Some of those moments from the SEC celebration that maybe you didn't catch if you were just watching on TV. I want to share some of that stuff with you as we go on throughout the day. But let's start with the big injury news. Georgia, kind of surprisingly, putting out injury information. We thought maybe we wouldn't hear anything until we got to New Orleans. But the Dawgs sending out a statement today saying that Carson Beck, which we all kind of knew, suffered an elbow injury in the SEC championship game, what kept him out of the second half. They say he and his family are looking for second opinions now. They'd been kind of widely reported it was a UCL injury, which is the ligament in your elbow, Tommy John, that pitchers have to have. And there's different severities to it. If it is the most severe, that's probably an 8-month recovery, something like Brock Purdy saw in the NFL. So maybe he's looking to see if maybe somebody just says it's a grade 2. Maybe he could get back potentially by the end of the season. We'll see. But we also got the news that punter Brett Thorson sustained a knee injury. It's his non-kicking leg, and he is done for the year. So a couple of things there. Brett Thorson by no means should be overlooked, but it's the big story is Carson Beck. Looks like his season could be over here, and it's time to turn the page to Gunner Stockton, Mike.
Yeah, if that is indeed the case, and like you said, Cody, it kind of looks like those are the indications right now. Georgia's got a lot of momentum with Gunner Stockton. One of the things that we saw with that mobile quarterback was a different looking Georgia offense, and shades of Stetson Bennett. It really is when you think about when JT Daniels got injured and they put Stetson in there and things changed a little bit. The receivers that year were a little banged up. Putting Stetson out there enabled Georgia to become a different sort of team. You started to see more of those 2 tight end looks that year. You saw Stetson and what he brought to the game, his ability, 2020, 2021. Stetson wasn't the vintage passer that he was with Todd Monken designing an offense around him in 2022. And, I dare say that I thought Gunner Stockton represented himself in tremendous fashion. And Mike Bobo called a really good game. Now, Gunner did have one throw that I know he wanted back, kind of a what the heck are you doing moment there when he threw it out in the flats late. But, the way he stepped up, some of the throws that he made, the way he read those defenses, the fact that Bobo prepared him for that moment, the fact that Gunner, was able to step up in the clutch like that. And you saw the way the offensive line blocked. Everybody realized that they had to pick it up a notch. And now that you got Trevor Etienne back, that Swiss Army knife, here's a guy that can run it or catch it out of the backfield. This Georgia offense looks different, and I think it's definitely strong enough with Gunner Stockton to beat whoever wins the Notre Dame-Indiana game in the Sugar Bowl.
Yeah, the good news for Georgia is, one, it couldn't happen at a better time. You got a month to prepare for Gunner Stockton, whether that looks like maybe more RPO that they throw in, and when you got a guy who can run a little bit. You look at the game, 16 passes. He went for about 4.4 yards per pass on that. So not a huge – they didn't ask a whole lot of him. He did show his arm strength, I think, of the pass to Lawson Lucky on the side where Lucky kind of dragged his foot. And good for Gunner Stockton for being prepared. He's been in this system for a few years now. It was no surprise to him. He wasn't totally shocked when he went out there. He looked like a strong quarterback. He obviously was a winner at Raven County when he was in high school. So Georgia's got some time to prepare for this and kind of find things that he can do and maybe reinvent themselves. It's kind of interesting because whether you get Indiana or Notre Dame, they're not going to know what to expect from this Georgia offense because it will look completely different than it did with Carson Beck.
Well, it'll be power football. is what it'll be. And again, Georgia's got 3 of the top interior offensive linemen in the nation. I thought the tackles stepped up and played well. And, we saw how Oscar Delp has really stepped up. I think he's showing vintage form right now. He's playing like the guy we thought he would be all year. Lawson Lucky had that Brock Bowers moment when he drugged the foot, and we've seen Jurasic, start to perform better. So I like this Georgia attack. Again, it's a different personality. You roll the pocket, as you said, maybe some more RPOs. I think Gunner Stockton has already proven the biggest thing to me, and that is, can he handle the moment? Right. These guys all practice and understand the checks and the plays and, can throw the route trees and that sort of thing. But can a quarterback handle the clutch moments and come through with the game on the line? And Gunner Stockton has already proven to me that he's the winner at the college level that he was at the high school level. And you really got to tip your cap to this guy because he hasn't had a lot of opportunities. There's been a lot of people vocal saying, well, we're just not sure he could be the next guy or that he could win at this level. And he went out there down 6-3 against the number 2 team in the nation and promptly drove this team 10 plays, 75 yards and a touchdown. I think can't understate the importance of ETN and what he was able to do on the ground, picking his way through those holes, running like an expert, showed you a little bit of that home run speed. Trevor, of course, can also catch the ball really well out of the backfield. Cash Jones, another guy that can catch the ball because, let's just call out the elephant in the room. The receivers are dropping the passes. And, Carson Beck was out there. It doesn't matter how pretty the ball is if someone's not catching it. We saw a big drop inside the 10. We saw a drop on down 40 yards downfield. Carson completed his first 5 passes. But when receivers are dropping the passes, that affects everyone. It doesn't just affect that play. We saw how Carson learned to overcome that, but it affects the defense. It affects the field position. And it's just really unfortunate. Now, I'll add this. I do think these receivers are going to be focused and working hard, and I think they'll represent themselves much, much better in New Orleans. But for now, if it is Gunner Stockton time, I think this is a dangerous offense with a physicality that can overpower anybody that's left in their path.
The only thing that worries me, Mike, and I will bring this up. So we see quarterbacks a lot of times where they just kind of get thrown into the fire and they don't have time to think about it. And so when we say Gunner Stockton kind of rose to the moment, he did, but he really didn't have a choice. It'll be interesting to see now that he knows, if this is the case. Of course, we haven't confirmed that Carson Beck is going to miss, but if he does miss, if this is Gunner Stockton's team going out there for the first time, that first drive, there may be a different feel than when you just they say, hey man, get out there right now and go take a snap. And granted, he had halftime, but that was a little bit different. The only other thing that worries me too with Gunner Stockton was the last play of the game, right? Or the penultimate play of the game where he just got rocked a little bit. It's one of those things where when he runs the football, he runs shoulder first and he's barging into people. And he was able to do that in Class AA football at Rabun County. Whole different thing in the SEC. And you're able to do that even in the G-Day game or in a practice when you're in a green jersey and they can't hit you. So a little bit different here. That's the only other thing that worries me because then you got Kirby Smart kind of confirmed it was Ryan Puglisi who has been ready to come in and then Jaden Rashada after that. But want to see him protect himself if you're going to be QB1.
Yeah, I understand that, but I can't take anything away from – I mean, this is a high football IQ guy, and this is a team guy. And I know it sounds hokey, and I know we're looking, for the analytics and the numbers. But to me, at some point, football is about heart. And when you get to this stage of the season and you've got a kid like Gunner Stockton that's basically willing to put his life on the line, I don't know any other way to say it. You saw the same play I did, and he's ready to go back out there again. I think this kid has an opportunity to do something special and seize the moment, provided, that if indeed Carson is out. And the way the team responded, sometimes when you lose one of your best players, it kind of reminds me when Peyton Manning moved on from Tennessee, everybody said, well, that was their chance to win it. And then a really inexperienced guy named T. Martin came in there the next year, and it was very simplified Tennessee offense, but it was power football. And the beauty was in the simplicity. And they were able to execute 6 or 7 plays perfect. And you had to line up and stop them. And again, when I look at this bracket, and I look at Notre Dame, and I look at Indiana, and I look at potentially Boise State, I say, are these teams that are going to stop the Georgia Bulldogs and their physicality from reaching the national championship game? Now, I don't know who's coming out of that other pod. Oregon, Tennessee, Texas, Ohio State. Those are some heavyweight teams. But you got to figure if Georgia reaches the national championship game, which I'm very confident they will, they're going to have generated some momentum, and they're going to evolve with whoever is at quarterback. I think the thing we haven't mentioned yet that we really need to is this defense has gotten real salty. Quietly, guys have been coming back and emerging. Xavier McLeod, remember at the beginning of the year, the abdominal, now I see him in there making plays. Smile Munden has played outstanding since he's back from the Tennessee. KJ Bolden, not looking like a freshman anymore. Dalen Everett got the MVP, 2 picks in that game. He was sticky. And Daniel Harris, they picked on him a little bit. They might have completed 1 or 2, but he was in position. He made some plays. I'd like where this Georgia defense is. They got 3 more weeks to marinate, Cody. I'm excited about this Georgia football team and their chance to win a national championship.
And we'll have a little bit more on the Georgia defense, but I will add Chaz Chambliss playing as good as he ever has in his Georgia career. Had a big sack. I was going through some of the video from last Saturday night, and that looked really good there. We will add, before we move on from the injuries, Brett Thorson, I think, obviously, we've said it forever, underrated with what he can do. That's going to be a loss. It looked like Charlie Hamm was the guy they were warming up. Was going to be kind of the guy moving on, but they could potentially just have tryouts for the next 3 weeks to figure out who it's going to be. But I think that's one of those losses you won't feel it till we get in the game and realize, man, that Aussie's so good.
Yeah, he flipped the field position all year long, and Brett's a leader, and I think he'll stay around the team. I think his influence will be felt, and maybe I'm guilty of this. Maybe I've just covered Georgia too long now, Cody. But I just assume the next guy's going to be ready. I just assume that Kirby's prepared. Tell you a quick story. When we went to Alabama for the Alabama game, we actually ended up staying at the same team hotel, and I noticed that the champion buses, and then there was a gold bus behind it. And I said, well, what is that bus right there? They said, well, that's the extra bus. I said, the extra bus? And doggone it, if it didn't happen, one of those 4 primary buses broke down, and Kirby had an extra bus ready to go. He does not leave any details to chance. Preparation is the name of the game. And I feel confident that whoever's back there punting is going to be able to do more than adequate job. Now, they're not going to be Brett Thorson. Thorson is a special guy. Make no mistake about it. Booming kicks, placed those kicks, showed you could make the tackle. But covering Georgia this long and understanding what Kirby Smart and this team is all about, I'm confident that Georgia's going to be just fine at punter, even after losing a star like Brett Thorson.
All right, so let's move on and talk a little bit. You kind of mentioned it a little bit. Georgia's playoff draw came out on Sunday, and we found out that, man, it looked as good as it could for Georgia when you look at their bracket. Of course, they're going to get the Sugar Bowl. We know that for sure. They're going to get the winner of Indiana or Notre Dame. Okay, seems like pretty good right there. Also, in that side of the bracket, you got Penn State and SMU going to play. Winner of that gets Boise State. The one thing that stands out to me when you look at the top of the bracket and the Texas and the Clemson and the Oregon and the Ohio State and the Arizona State even, that top half of the bracket, even though those teams have losses this year, the way that those teams recruit, they recruit against Georgia. A lot of those players are 4- and 5-star players, which means at any point they turn it on and they will put it to whatever team, and that makes all of those teams really, really dangerous. I feel like you look at the teams that Georgia's in the bracket with on the bottom half there. In Georgia, there are better players than most of those guys in that bracket. And so to me, that says that's why I like the draw for Georgia. You physically should be able to dominate all of those teams.
Exactly. And again, that plays into the news. And for the folks that are just joining us, Carson Beck getting a second opinion. We don't know if he's out or not. We're projecting, what happens if it's Gunner Stockton. And again, I say the physicality. Cody, I'd make the argument that 5 of the top 6 teams are in the upper half of that bracket. With Georgia being the other one. Clemson right now, very dangerous team. You saw the game with SMU. Texas, we know all about their talent level. At some point, Sark's going to figure out to use Arch Manning a little bit more. Tennessee, a physical, capable team. Ohio State loaded with the 5 stars. And, of course, we know all about Dan Lanning already. And who knows about Arizona State? I mean, those guys just really like each other. They were picked to finish worst, and there they are as a 4 seed playing some pretty good football the way they put it on Iowa State, even with a noon kick. Coming from Arizona, that was very impressive. Now, that said, Boise State is a bit of a curveball. If you get them, they have an outstanding quarterback and, of course, running back that's a Heisman finalist. But, boy, Miami is a long way away from Boise. And, of course, this will be the Orange Bowl where they would play Boise State. SMU, scary. Good quarterback, upstart team, but they haven't been there before. And Penn State, I just don't know if they can get over the hump. Now, they went down the field on Oregon. Oregon's defense a little suspect. Dan doesn't have those Georgia guys like he did playing defense with the Bulldogs. But to me, I think Georgia got the best draw possible. Indiana, Notre Dame, I'm not saying why even bother to play the game, but why even play the game? Georgia can beat either one of the. Notre Dame has not faced stiff competition. I mean, they lost to Northern Illinois. I don't care how bad of a day it was. That should never happen, to lose to Northern Illinois on your home turf with any kind of team. In Indiana, I hate to call them imposters because they ran up the score on some Big Ten teams, but they ran up the score on some Big Ten teams, and they got blasted when they played a quality opponent like Ohio State. So feel really good about where Georgia's at. Obviously, Kirby Smart, I don't think anybody would trade him for any coach in the country. The preparation, the guys that are staying together. I almost feel like that Georgia Tech game, and I know a lot of people were kind of, oh, that's a 6-play. Listen, that was a galvanizing win, and you better believe the confidence from winning in 8 overtimes kicked in when they had Texas going to overtime. Georgia didn't just hope they were going to win. They knew they were going to beat the Longhorns in overtime.
Yeah, it's one of the things about this team is they've kind of proved it time and again that, and they say it's almost cliche, and it is cliche, the resiliency on this team, because that's one of those core traits that Kirby Smart talked about. But boy, when they go out there and prove it, it's hard to argue with that. Do you have a preference? Who would you called out Texas in the SEC chip? So tell me now, Indiana, Notre Dame, you have a preference there?
Oh, I think you'd rather see Indiana. I think Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman, if you remember, he was the defensive coordinator at Cincinnati, for that heart-stopping Peach Bowl win when JT Daniels engineered a late drive. And, of course, we saw that field goal at the end to beat an undefeated Cincinnati team. I think Marcus Freeman knows how to motivate his guys. I think his schemes are tricky. I'm not sure how effective that would be if Georgia's simplified and playing with Gunner and moving that pocket. It becomes a lot more difficult for a defensive coordinator when you've got a mobile quarterback and you're playing that double tight end. At the end of the day, you got to have guys that can line up and stop them. And I'm going to tell you, Oscar Delp is big boy. Now, he's playing some physical football. He's catching passes. Lawson Lucky's back. That was an incredible catch. And Jurasic's figured out. The Stanford guy, I don't know. Stanford guy must have done some extra studying in the library, because it looks like he's figured out how to play SEC football. And then those receivers are going to be eager to redeem themselves. They really will. I just don't think you're going to be in a position where you're throwing it 30 or 35 times with Gunner. I think that Gunner is effective. I think their ability to run the ball. ETN is a huge addition. To get ETN back, I mean, that's an NFL running back right there. He's a very skilled runner. He's a very good pass catcher. He's just such a weapon that can score from anywhere on the field. I think Georgia's really missed him. And the offensive line, Tate Ratledge might have played one of his best games. And, Tate wants it. And you can feel it. You can see it. He's such a great leader. Wilson, maybe he is the best center in the country. I like where Georgia's positioned. I like the football that they're playing. I like the way the teams come together, Cody.
Will you, and another month for those guys and the offensive line too to get healthy, which is something they've struggled with all year. It's one of those things we talk about in baseball playoffs. We never did talk about it when Georgia had a month to prepare for a team. We always felt great about that. Is there this rest versus rust argument that you could make? A team you're going to play is coming off a huge win in the first round of the playoffs. They're going to feel like they are hot. Do you feel like there's any worry that Georgia sitting on their hands for a month will come out rusty?
Well, consider this. Kirby had won 21 straight games dating back to that Texas Sugar Bowl when he had more than a week to prepare. Nobody's going to out-prepare these guys. They're not going to forget how to play football. And I do know that the portal does bring some challenges as far as practice goes. And, of course, Kirby will be careful not to get guys hurt. But it's not like Georgia's just going to be, sitting around playing cards. They're going to be out there on the practice field, and you're going to have future guys, future NFL players on offense going against future NFL players on defense, and they will be ready. They'll be ready to hit some people. I mean, Cody, it's a 3-game season, and I don't know if I ever thought in all reality that, Georgia could, play 3 games. If you would have said, just think about this. If you'd have said, hey, Georgia, to win a national title, Georgia's either got to beat Indiana or Notre Dame first. We just said check. Then they got to be able to beat, Boise State, Penn State, or SMU. We'd have laughed to say, oh yeah. So really, what we're coming down to is can Kirby Smart beat Dan Lanning and the Ducks, or likely Ohio State? And I just don't know if Ohio State's quarterback. I mean, they just lost to Michigan. Michigan, this is a bad Michigan team. They got beat at home by that team. I just wonder, if where Ohio State's at with this. I think you're going to see the Oregon Ducks, and it's going to be Dylan Gabriel and a really fast, electric offense coming back to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And I'm not going to say remember what happened the last time, because Oregon's invested a lot of money in players since then. But do you think Dylan Gabriel's seen a pass rush like Georgia can put on him? I don't.
We talked about some of the difficulties of practicing with the transfer portal. Before we wrap up this first segment, that is one of those things that's going on. We've got a tracker on DawgNation.com. You can kind of see as things happen, as things break. It will be updated on that list as of this moment on Monday night. You've got, of course, Julian Humphrey, who did it right after the Georgia Tech game. We've kind of dealt with that for a while now. Right after the SEC championship game, kind of strangely, Michael Jackson III, who's the guy who transferred in from Southern Cal last year, put his name in. Those two, really didn't surprise me. One that did kind of shock me today was Nitro Tuggle, freshman wide receiver for Georgia, who had been getting some run, got some play in the game the other day. It was kind of interesting because Kirby Smart has lamented this fact of the year. These guys come to a place for a year. Wide receiver is not an easy position to just get right out there and play. And, granted, he's not gone. He could come right back. He could just kind of flirt with it like we've seen guys do. But that one's kind of interesting to me. It seems like a lot of that room's going to be moving on, and there's spots to be had there. I don't know. It's kind of a weird one here in Nitro Tuggle in the portal.
Well, I'm guessing Nitro probably wasn't happy with the amount of opportunities he got this year. I think he did step up and play well when given the opportunity on Saturday. But, part of what makes Georgia so special, Cody, is what happens, Monday through Friday. I mean, there's a lot that goes into being a Georgia Bulldog when it comes to the commitment and the level of practice effort that it takes. And we don't know who's ringing Nitro's phone. I mean, it's that time of year now. Lane Kiffin said it. It's crazy that the portal opens up while these teams are in the playoff. He said, can you imagine if NFL free agency or NBA free agency took place during the playoffs? But we saw the early signing date moved up so the coaches would know who they had. And now we've seen this portal window moved up. And that's going to basically, be added to by the amount of players that are going pro or coming back. I mean, maybe now instead of just looking at the portal, and I said this earlier this year, I said, gosh, sure would have been nice to have Kendall Milton or Dejon Edwards or Marcus Rosemy-Jacksain or even Ladd McConkey was on the table for the right price. I know Ladd was considering coming back as well. And how nice would it have been if you could have re-recruited those guys and spent some of that transfer money on guys that are already in your program? So I wonder how much of that we'll see this year from Dawgs that could go pro and maybe be third or fourth round picks. Or, do you do what Nazir Stackhouse and Warren Brinson did and come back another year and improve and bump up your draft stock and give yourself a chance, or Tate Ratledge, another one, to give yourself a chance to win an SEC championship, a national championship, get paid along the way, and improve your draft stock. So there's a lot of roster management going on right now, and I recognize that's a challenge. But again, I think Kirby Smart's been the best at this roster management game, albeit the incoming transfers haven't always worked out the best. But in terms of the player retention, I think they've done a very good job. It's going to be hard for some of these guys to walk away from the Georgia Bulldogs, knowing how they get prepared and knowing how many guys Kirby Smart's put in the league.
Really well said. All right, we're going to take our first break here on The Beat. When we come back, I'm going to share some video with you from the SEC celebration that maybe you didn't see from TV. We've got that. I've got another really important question to ask you, Mike, too. I'll do that on the other side of the break. This is On The Beat, presented by Ingalls.
So, you going to play this week?
You gonna play this week?
You gonna play this week?
You gonna play this week?
You going to play this
You
week?
gonna play this week? You gonna play this week?
You gonna play this week?
You gonna play this week?
And welcome to the Ingalls Game of the Week as the Warhorses square off against the rival
He's going in.
He's going in. Go, baby!
Ingalls, we're with you every step of the way.
Love having Ingalls a part of the program, and it's fun to have On the Beat live for you tonight with so much news going on. Mike and I felt like it was an important night to do it live. All right, one of the segments we do every week on the beat is we share some video that I got from the sidelines of the previous Georgia game. We call it Boots on the Ground. Now, one of the things we did earlier in the show was kind of throw some flowers Gunner Stockton's way. He kind of came into the game, won Georgia the SEC championship, kind of turned their fortunes around. One of the other things he did, and one of the things that he should get more credit for, not only when Carson Beck goes out, does Gunner Stockton have to come in and play quarterback, he's got to come in and be the holder for field goals as well. And the thing about having your quarterback as the holder as opposed to like a punter or some other backup special teams player, you can actually see him on this video. He's kind of huffing and puffing. Those guys had just got done with a third down where they failed, where he's either scrambling or running for his, like, whatever he's doing, and it failed. Now he's got to collect himself, get the ball, and get the snap and place it down. And really nice job by Gunner Stockton having to pick up those responsibilities as well when Carson Beck went out.
Well, I mean, it just goes to show these guys are football players first. And, the way Gunner ran the ball, you can see that he also played safety on defense, very physical. But that is a skill. And how big was it, once again, that Georgia was prepared 3 deep with the holder for, some all-important kicks. I mean, it just goes to show you how much work goes into being a Georgia football player and how Kirby uses the best players in these situations. I mean, Carson Beck was the holder before, and then it was Thorson, and now it's Gunner. Gunner Stockton, just can't say enough about this kid. He deserves that moment in time, that legacy moment that he had in the SEC championship game. And now there might even be more, Cody. And it's just one of these stories as a sports writer you love to write. You love to see the good guys have success. And Gunner Stockton has been that good guy. He has bided his time. He has smiled. He has supported his teammates. He has taken all those reps. And when the moment came, he was ready.
One of the cool things is he, up in Raven County, he was kind of trained in high school by George Bobo, who was the dad of who else but Mike Bobo. Mike Bobo had him recruited to South Carolina. He was going to go play for Bobo there. Now both getting their chance for the hometown team with the Georgia Bulldogs. And talking about hometown Georgia guys, second piece of video from Boots on the Ground this week. A cool moment I caught in the celebration as Gunner's kind of walking off the field with his SEC championship cap on and his SEC championship shirt. Well, who does he run into? One of his teammates who was out there giving everybody hugs. It was Malaki Starks. These two with a great history and a really cool moment here, Mike.
Yeah, you got to like that. And they go way back. Of course, Malaki told a funny story about how Gunner almost made him quit football in the Pee Wee ranks because he hit him so hard in the Pee Wee ranks. And now we see Malaki as, the headhunter in the secondary, led the team in tackles. And you see Gunner, the winning quarterback in the game. So, a couple of local guys from Georgia getting it done. I know the Georgia fans love that. When you got these in-state guys that are heroes, you appreciate that. Malachi's been a fantastic leader. And again, Gunner Stockton, a guy that's ready to represent.
And just kind of shows, even there, this team is going to rally around Gunner Stockton the way they did in the SEC championship game. Just kind of fun there, a little Raven County and Jefferson love. And always fun to bring up the story of Malaki Starks. Maybe was going to quit football because Gunner Stockton hit him so hard. All right.
He might have been pouring it on there a little bit. I don't think Malaki was ever really going to give up football, but he certainly made the point. His dad was upset that he was crying after Gunner hit him. He said he sent him back on the field. Knock that off.
Yeah, Larry Starks ain't going to put up with that. Love that. All right, last piece of video. Something we hadn't seen on the sideline the entire year we saw in the SEC championship game. It is the man with the reading glasses down there, Will Muschamp, because he was kind of going off on the weekends to see his son at Vanderbilt. Well, now that season's over. He gets to be there with Georgia, coaching on the sideline, not only doing the stuff he was doing, kind of game planning behind the scenes during the week, but beginning to be there on game day and make those important adjustments.
Oh, I don't think there's a question that Will Muschamp adds an element, to the team. He's so well liked by the players, and he's another set of eyes for Kirby. He's a guy that's been there and done it. I think Will Muschamp, probably one of the most elite defensive coordinators in history, and we know the head coaching did a decent job at times there, but he's really known for his defensive coordinator abilities. And I think having him there to work with Kirby, to work with Shu, to work with Traveris, I think it adds a little bit more to the element. And, I don't think that's something that we can overlook, as far as how they're going to scout Notre Dame and Indiana, some of the planning. But above all, I just think Muschamp brings a sense of calm and peace. I know the players love him. They say he's great to be around. Old Coach Boom bringing a little bit more energy to that Georgia defense.
Yeah, we've talked about like getting players back from injury and how it can kind of revitalize you in the playoff run. Well, how about getting a coach back on game days? I think that's going to be a huge thing as we move forward in the playoffs. Will be really interesting there. And we are not going to bring up the other coach who was on the sideline, the former offensive coordinator Todd Monken was there as well, and plenty of people spouting off on Twitter about that. But I don't think Todd Monken's going to be helping them with the halftime adjustments. But it was cool to kind of see him. He did have some fun moments with some of his former players.
Well, and that's cool, that he has that relationship where he wants to be there with the team and for the team. And obviously, Coach Monken did a fantastic job. I'm not sure how we would do without Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey, James Cook, and Kenny McIntyre. Let's remember, there were some advantages to being Todd Monken when Brock Bowers was there. We recently just set an NFL record for the number of catches by a rookie tight end.
All right, so that is boots on the ground for this week. I do have another question for you, and I'm not going to – maybe I'll ask it now so I don't hijack your segment, which is Mike's 30,000-foot view. We talked about the injuries off the top of the show. It's kind of a big picture question. Does this make you, we felt like the conference championship games were already in question, right? Because you had teams already locked in the playoffs. Does this make it harder to want to play in a conference championship game when you lose two starters off your team to injury for a game that, yes, Georgia gets the bye, but they were probably in the playoff either way? Does this hurt the argument for playing a conference championship game?
Well, I'm going to go Kirby Smart on you here, Cody. It doesn't matter whether it hurts it or not. It's going to happen, so there's no point in talking about it. These conference championship games are big money makers. They produced a lot of drama and excitement. You got to see Clemson play its way in. I thought that was a great moment for Dabo Sweeney and the Clemson Tigers to play their way in. You got to see a very game effort from SMU. Certainly this Georgia football team, they were able to win an SEC championship and go in and earn a bye, overcome that difficult schedule they played that Texas did not, and show the league who the best team was. Anybody that you give a schedule to, and I think Nick Saban said it best, you turn on the NFL and you watch the Cleveland Browns beat a Pittsburgh team that's much better because the schedule takes its toll. And that's never been more true than now in the SEC. And you can look at the road records of these top 25 teams in the SEC. Losing records on the road speaks to the parity in the league and the difficulty of traveling against this level of talent. There's going to be attrition. There's going to be a wear down factor. At the same time, the SEC championship game is a tradition. It goes back, 32 years. You can't tell those kids that are celebrating in that picture right now that it's not important or meaningless. They've got something that they're going to be able to hold on to for the rest of their life. That senior class has an SEC championship, a second SEC championship to celebrate. Kirby now with 4 straight SEC appearances. I believe only Steve Spurrier accomplished that. I think he had 5 at one point. So we're seeing some historic things happen. Now, you may ask a little bit about the scheduling, and I might have mentioned a time or two I didn't think it was a good idea to play a blood rival the week before. You may want to reevaluate that. Maybe you want to give the teams a week off before their conference championship game, or maybe you reevaluate how quickly you want the conference championship game loser to have to turn around and play. Texas, of course, playing 2 weekends from now. So I think the attrition is something worth mentioning. I think you're on it, but I would look more at maybe giving the team a week to prepare or an extra week afterward before they get into the playoff, the losing team, that is.
Yeah, it was interesting, the college football playoff committee this week. They did match up Clemson and Texas, who both had to play in a conference championship game. Then you get teams who did not have to, like Indiana and Notre Dame, matching up as well. So it actually kind of equal rest was out there for some of those teams. All right, now we will do Mike's 30,000-foot view. We kind of hit on a lot of stuff with the college football playoff and the world at large. But Mike, tell us about what's going on, your opinions on what happened on Selection Sunday.
Well, I wasn't surprised. I thought SMU would get in. I mean, we've talked a lot about the narrative. If you're going to have conference championship games, they need to count and they need to be rewards. Now, I will tell you, I think it was an unintended consequence that there was this late movement to protect the conference championship game losers. I think that was an unintended consequence of the playoff. Now, if you're asking me if the 12 best teams got in, absolutely not. Alabama, South Carolina, Ole Miss, I think these teams are better than half of the field, to be quite frank with you. But when they sold this idea for a 12-team playoff, remember there were still 2 years left on the existing contract of the other bowl system they had in place, the 14 playoff, and they had to kind of massage things to get everyone to agree to it. And part of that was to guarantee playoff bids and buys for conference champions, the 4 highest ranked conference champions. So part of this is you're going to get a little bit more, a little less regionalism. You're going to spread the brand out a little bit more. You're going to give these other conferences an opportunity to start the playoffs on equal footing. Now, the fly in the ointment was how this particular selection committee decided to value wins and losses. It wasn't like last year. Remember, Florida State had more wins than either Alabama or Texas and even won their league championship game. But we didn't hear any of these arguments. And as far as protecting the conference championship game loser, there was nobody stumping for a number 1 Georgia team that had won 29 games in a row. And they fell out by losing just by a field goal. So things have changed quickly. Kirby Smart said it in 2018, Cody. The College Football Playoff Selection Committee, it's like a jury. Everyone's a little bit different. Everyone's going to look at different things. And this particular selection committee valued wins and losses much greater than strength of schedule. I think the lesson that's been learned from this, and you hear a lot of the football coaches echoing one another, is they need to think more like the NCAA basketball tournament. It's not always the team with the most wins that's the best. Schedule strength is a big part of the consideration. We talk about the RPI rating, for example. Every conference champion doesn't get seated high in the NCAA basketball tournament. They're able to scout this out and say, hey, look at this. We're going to put 8 or 9 ACC teams and only 3 teams in from the SEC yesteryear. Now we got the SEC beating up on the ACC in the recent SEC-ACC challenge. Of course, we got to see Georgia put one on Notre Dame in basketball. And so these bids go out relative to the conference strength. I do think when we get the new contract and the new playoff system that'll be in place starting with the 2026 season, I think Kirby Smart might have previewed a little bit and said maybe all these conference champions shouldn't be guaranteed buys. Maybe the team should be seeded in the order of how good they are. Now, that wouldn't seem like such a new thought or such a crazy thought, and yet still it sounds like we're asking for a favor. Hey, how about you put the best teams at the top? How about you give the best teams a bye, like you do in every Pee Wee tournament that every kid's ever played in? That's all we want here, Cody. We're not asking for them to come up with some new math or some new science. We just want to see the best teams ranked the highest and seeded the highest. A little bit of common sense. That's all we want.
You feel like after this year, based on the results, like assuming the teams that we expect, the Indianas and the SMUs, we expect those teams to lose early. Now, if that happens, do you feel like that will provide the change that's needed to say, all right, you saw what we did this year. We can't do that again.
Well, I mean, I certainly think it's fuel for the fire, but let's be honest here for a second. We're complaining about this, but Cody, this has worked out pretty good for Georgia.
Certainly, certainly. When Bama was not announced as the number 11 team, I can tell you, I said, okay.
Yeah, this deal, and also if this was still a 14 playoff, Georgia would be in it. So the Dogs were going to find a way one way or the other, and Kirby's really good about just kind of accepting things as they are and dealing with it instead of complaining about it or worrying about it or wasting energy on something he can't control. He goes at the situation as is, and the hand that Georgia has been dealt here is awful sweet. So we can complain and talk about how it could have been, should have been different. But I think you'd much rather see Georgia sitting there getting ready to play the Indiana Notre Dame winner than the South Carolina Ole Miss winner.
Now, I can't say this for sure. We may have been on here doing something different. But as a Georgia fan, if you lose to Vanderbilt, you can't go score even a touchdown against Oklahoma. As a Georgia fan, to me, it would be like, yeah, we probably didn't deserve to be in the playoff. And it's hard to complain. Now, yes, when you compare yourself with the other teams, yeah, but the standard that a place like Alabama or a place like Georgia has says, we got we got to blame ourselves. We can't score a touchdown against Oklahoma. We can't beat Vanderbilt. Yeah, maybe we don't deserve to be in the playoff this year.
Well, that's the reaction I've gotten. Just talking to Alabama fans, they don't. I know there's some that love the Tide and want to see him and everything, but the people educated fans I've talked to, they don't want to see this version of Alabama in the playoff. They don't believe this version of Alabama represented the brand. And when I heard Greg McElroy, who called the SMU Clemson game, talking about the importance of putting SMU in, I said, holy cow, that's an Alabama quarterback on television right now saying that they don't deserve to be in the playoff based on how they played. And more importantly, that SMU did deserve to be in the playoff. I mean, that was quite a game. That was quite a game effort from SMU. And again, works to Georgia's favor. They're in the bracket. And not to say that SMU couldn't win 1 out of 10 times, but you got to like the odds for Georgia right now. When you look at that bracket, you look at those final rankings. I did think it was interesting that the way they protected the championship game losers, and I agreed with it. I didn't necessarily agree with the rankings the week before, but those were the rankings, and Ward Manuel said it. We're not going to move these teams that aren't playing. And then he also said it another time during the call when I asked him a question, that we're not moving backwards from the rankings. In other words, the teams that were in the championship games, even if they lost, unless something crazy happened, they were not going to drop below the teams that did not play. So I will say this for the committee. If nothing else, they were consistent. We may not have agreed with their methodology, but they didn't change things up or move teams around to get the matchups that they wanted. I thought for a moment there, boy, they're not going to be able to resist that Alabama-Notre Dame television matchup. And then Alabama didn't make the field. And then I told myself, oh, my goodness, you're definitely going to see SMU playing Texas in a game. Well, you're not. So I think that they did hold true to their rankings and their methodology, and they were consistent at the very least. I think these teams would have liked to have known, 3 or 4 years in advance that they weren't going to get credit for playing really good teams in non-conference. I don't think they knew that. That's still kind of the fly in the ointment with this formula, is that you never know what the College Football Playoff Committee is going to lean on most or prioritize most when they do their rankings.
And the thing about it is they have so many stats at their disposal. You can find stats to make whatever argument they want to make that year. So it is kind of a moving target, and they, it can be what they want it to be, because you could find stats for pretty much anything to make your point. And we kind of saw that with the arguments that South Carolina and Ole Miss made as well. You can find the stats to make the argument for who you want in. All right, good stuff there, Mike. Mike's 30,000-foot view. We're going to take another break. When we come back, it'll be our Anytime Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing Who's Hot and Who's Cold segment.
I'm so glad you're here.
Let's take a look.
Anytime can handle all your HVAC and plumbing needs, providing top quality service for a reasonable price.
All fixed now.
Can we call you again?
Yes, anytime.
Any day?
Yes, anytime.
But for the heat?
Yes, anytime.
For the toilet?
Yes, anytime. Anytime you have a problem, just call.
Anytime Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing. Large enough to handle your HVAC needs, but small enough to care.
All right, it is anytime for our Who's Hot and Who's Cold segment this week. Who you got? Who's hot, Mike?
Well, I've been waiting a long time to say this, and I've kind of talked a lot about it, during the show. But wow, how about Trevor Etienne? This is why you went and got that Gator, and this is why that Gator came to Georgia to put up that sort of performance. 16 carries, 94 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5 catches, 28 yards. What was that stat, Cody? I think that Woodring and Etienne accounted for all these points. They're going to be tired of seeing Woodring and Etienne. And who knows what Etienne will do, by the way. Does he come back for another year, or does he go pro? He hadn't had a lot of film this year. He's playing real good right now. I'll bet you Trevor Etienne would like a nice long playoff run and a couple 100-yard performances to vault his way into the end. That is an NFL back, folks. This guy is a pro. When you watch him turn those jets on and adjust his speed and change direction and read those holes, I am amazed by Trevor Etienne. This legend is in the making. Trevor Etienne, red hot right now.
Trevor Etienne, I was there with him. My job after the game was to get everything Trevor Etienne said at the game-winning touchdown. That guy's smile was so big. One of the best smiles in the SEC. He was so happy. One of the things he said, I've never gotten to play in one of these kind of games. I always wanted to do that. He said, I was telling guys about, we got to go play in the bowl game out in Las Vegas last year, and they were looking at me like I was crazy because all the Georgia players have played in college football playoffs and SEC championship. The biggest thing he had was the Las Vegas Bowl, and you could tell how much he wanted it, how much he wanted to get back. And, who knows how percent healthy he was. So he's only going to get better from there. But what a pleasant surprise to see him warming up before the game and out there making big plays in a game that really mattered to him.
Yeah, no doubt. And Frazier's exciting. He's fun, but the ball security issue scary a little bit. He's only a freshman. He's going to get better. He's going to be he's going to be an all-SEC type of player. He's going to provide some sparks and some big plays during Georgia's 3-game playoff stretch run that you're going to see ahead. But it's so great to have a veteran like ETN, who's there to lead the way, be that leader in the locker room, and be that playmaker on the field that whether it's Beck or Gunner, you like seeing number one there in the flats. You get it to him, he's going to make some people miss and turn the Jets on.
Yeah, well, also, how about Dabo Swinney and Clemson? They are hot right now for making it into the college football playoff when they were 5.5 feet under with their hopes as well. So Georgia, of course, beat the ACC champ too, which is always something fun to tout. All right, that's who's hot this week. Who you got? Who's cold?
I'd say the relationship between Kirby Smart and Greg Sankey is chilly right now. and listen, that was calculated. Let's be honest, Cody, and the Georgia fans watching know this. They remember when they added A&M and Missouri to the league, and Georgia had to play at Auburn 2 years in a row. Georgia took that hit for the league, right? I don't know if they remember, but 2019, there were 5 Georgia opponents that had a bye week before they played the Dawgs, including South Carolina, the last game they lost at home 31 games ago. That was not favorable. And when that 2020 schedule came out and we all thought, well, they'll just rotate the next 2 teams on the opponent on the schedule. Somehow, Florida and Alabama didn't play, right? But Georgia ended up going to Tuscaloosa in 2020. That was a tough schedule break. Now, I'm not here to suggest, and I certainly don't believe that Commissioner Sankey has anything against the SEC. But just in case, Kirby Smart put him on blast and it sent a message. If you're going to give us the short end of the stick, Commissioner, we're going to announce it to the world. Kirby's going to tell everybody about it. Now, will that affect how the schedule works out in the future or not? I don't know. Did maybe somebody let me know that Georgia also is the only team in the league to play the 3 SEC teams that aren't going to a bowl game this year? Maybe I heard that from a little birdie in Birmingham. Maybe that was kind of a quiet shot fired back that, hey, you played the best teams, but you also played the 3 worst, Georgia. I'm just saying, I think that Kirby took a stand for his school. He took a stand for the fans, and he took a stand for his players saying, hey, you gave us this schedule. And when he came out there on his press conference day on Monday, Cody, I know you noticed it. Kirby's wearing some camouflage top. I mean, was that not a message that Georgia was going to war? Don't you think the message is they didn't want you guys here? We're not supposed to be here. They gave us this schedule. So I think that was Kirby caught up in the moment. It was truly a Kirby moment. And it's part of what makes Kirby Smart special is, he's going to take up for his guys and stand behind him. And he doesn't care who he's got to take up for his guys against.
Yeah, it was so funny to see because I was, of course, standing on the podium and watching Georgia, so I didn't see the reaction until the TV, how they kind of did it. And then I got back in, and there's kind of an in-house feed, and you could see, I put it on my Twitter if you want to go find it, but those two, Greg Sankey and Kirby Smart, kind of got together afterwards, and the way Sankey kind of put his hand on his shoulder, kind of squeezed a little bit, it looked very much like when your dad comes to you and he said, you did something great, but he's just angry at you. Yeah, one of those moments, and you could tell he wasn't real pleased.
Better not try that in game when the game's going on. He might have got a little different version of Kirby Smart. Things get pretty excitable on that Georgia sideline, and Kirby, if Kirby could put the pads back on, he would, and you know it.
Oh, there was also, they had a video of him running down the sideline. He was trying to play defense. You could definitely tell he wants to be out there if he could. Absolutely. All right, as we wrap up our live version of On the Beat, we will kind of go back to the top of the show and tell you some of the news that happened today if you were late joining us. Georgia putting out a release, which they don't do a whole lot with injuries, saying that Carson Beck did in fact injure his elbow in the game, which we all kind of knew, but he also is getting a second opinion on what kind of confirms a UCL injury, a Tommy John ligament in his arm, getting a second opinion there. Nothing official yet after that, so not sure if we will see him in the Sugar Bowl. Kind of feels like a long shot right now. Maybe it's Gunner Stockton's time. Also, Brett Thorson, we do know, is out for the rest of the season.
Cody,
there.
let me say this too about Carson Beck. If we have seen the last of Carson, and we don't know that yet, the family is getting a second opinion. But I would celebrate this for Carson. And we know that there were some tough times for him this year, but in those last 3-4 games, he was outstanding. And Carson absolutely carried this team into the SEC championship game with his performances against Tennessee, with his gutsy 3rd and 9 scramble to set up the game-tying touchdown against Georgia Tech. I thought Carson played outstanding. I thought he grew right before our eyes. I think his NFL stock went right back up at the end of the year. He overcame a lot of dropped passes this year, and I thought he was playing his best football. Remember, he completed his first 5 passes in this game against Texas, and one of the drops was inside the 8-yard. It was inside the 10-yard line. That was going to be a touchdown drive. I thought his attitude changed. I thought he grew, and I thought he was playing his best football. And if Georgia does indeed win the national championship, you better believe that Carson Beck is every bit as part of this story as anyone else. Again, his growth, his resiliency. I know a lot of people are proud of Carson Beck. I know the NFL has seen what they needed to see out of him. So I just think it's important that we note that Carson Beck did indeed carry Georgia into that SEC championship game with his resolve and his attitude and his ability to run the ball. He showed just how athletic he could be. And folks, if he comes back, Georgia's chances are, to me, the same. Whether they go to more of a running game, double tight end, roll the pocket out, or whether Carson's back and you see him making those clutch scrambles and those big time throws and using ETN. I mean, ETN, regardless of who's at quarterback, to me, that's really the key. That Swiss Army knife. That guy can score from anywhere on the field.
Yeah, when it comes to Carson Beck, first off, he was right there with Gunner Stockton the whole rest of the day, right? Had every reason to be down in the dumps and not happy with what happened. But he was right there in Gunner's ear the whole rest of the night, which is something to be commended, something we expect him to do, even if he has to have surgery throughout this playoff run. The other part of it, we kind of, he caught so much flack this year, right? Talking about his Lamborghini and his model girlfriend. But when cards were on the table, everything was pushed in the middle. He trotted himself out there with one arm and took the game-winning snap, and Trevor Etienne said it was the perfect handoff as well. That's toughness out there. So no pretty boy stuff there when he heads out there with one arm to take that last snap to get Georgia an SEC championship.
Really grew up before our eyes, Cody. Really good story for Carson Beck this year. The comeback kid, I thought he finished really strong. And again, if there's more football left, that's good. And if not, then I think Gunner Stockton is going to be ready to take the next step and win the Sugar Bowl.
All right, really good stuff there. We're going to have a ton of news breaking throughout this week, whether it is more injury news. We expect probably more guys going into the transfer portal. Just because you go in doesn't mean you leave. So folks, keep that in mind as well. Some of these players, you're still recruiting them back to you. So Nitro Tuggle is in the portal. We found that out today. He could be a player that comes back like a Julian Humphrey who did last year and then came back, but of course now is in the portal one more time. So we'll have all that covered for you on DawgNation.com. Mike's got on there talking about Georgia's draw. Great article there. If you want more from what we had on the show today, it's going to be a big week as we move on, and we'll all be in New Orleans on Sugar Bowl. I guess it's not. It's a Wednesday
some of this.
Thursday, a Wednesday.
Say this, Cody. Say this. Some of this attrition is a healthy thing. Kirby said that last year. There's guys that are going to have other opportunities, and while the Georgia players are getting phone calls, Georgia's making a few phone calls too around the country. Just remember that. It goes both ways here. Exactly.
And Kirby Smart, there's going to be some folks he's not sad to see go, and some folks he'll be bringing in as well and kind of restocking things. So really good stuff there. Thanks, Mike, for joining us on a live version of On the Beat tonight, presented by Ingles, and we will see you right back here next